Welcome to everyone who's joining in live, and welcome to everyone watching this video. This is a recording of a live online session. So if you haven't already, let's begin to tune in, to take in the life force. Bruno called it Hailstrom. He combined two German words. The second word, Strom, energy, current, force, wave. The first word, Heil, is often translated as healing stream, and that's one of the meanings of Heil. And it's helpful to remember that this energy is healing. But I'm starting to think that that translation really misses the point. Another meaning of Heil is divine, and another meaning is salvation. So, this energy we're taking in, this is the power of God. This is divine energy. And what's the ultimate purpose of this energy? It's salvation. And salvation, according to Bruno Groening, is very simply what a complex word, salvation. And yet, Bruno makes it so clear salvation is freedom from all evil, freedom from everything negative. Healing is more of a side effect, right? A lot of different medications, you take the medication and it does a positive thing, and like it has all these negative side effects. Well, this energy we're taking in, what it does is it connects us to God and it frees us from all evil. And then, as a side effect, it also heals the body. So let's observe the body with the intention to take in this divine force, this divine power. And let's be mindful as we take it in that we're literally taking in the power of God. And that this power can do anything because that which sends it, God, is limitless. So let's spend a few minutes taking in the good. And the way to do that, for anyone who's new, is to observe the body, having the intention to take in positive life energy. Hmm. So, as always, if anyone wants to share what they're feeling, if they have any inspirations or quotes of Bruno's, quotes of the Bible that come to them, please do share it. And feedback on the volume is very welcome as well. So, what is Bruno Groening's role in the healing, in the awakening, in the salvation process that we're all here doing? What part does Bruno Groening have? Bruno was adamant that he didn't heal, that God heals. And yet, he was also very firm that once someone has taken on enough evil, they need a helping hand to free themselves from that evil. So it's something I think about a lot. And I don't know that there's necessarily a logical answer. Certainly, certainly Bruno Groening helps, and yet he says that help is just that he passes along what God gave him. So here's a quote of Bruno's. I ask you, give me your illness, and I'll give you health. I'll bring you the healing that you've been desiring for so long. So I've experienced that, and many people have experienced that. Just handing an illness, a burden, a life situation over to Bruno, and it just shifts in an instant. I had that happen. There was a point in my life where I was waking up every the middle of the night, and I had to go. I had to urinate. I had to go to the bathroom, and I tried not drinking any water after 6 p.m., and that didn't help either. And so I went to the doctor, and he gave me a diagnosis of benign enlarged prostate, meaning that the prostate was larger than was healthy, but it wasn't cancerous or anything. It had just um, and that's what was causing the urination in the middle of the night. And as soon as I heard that, I just had the thought, well, Bruno Groening shrinks brain tumors. He can shrink my prostate. Like it was a little bit irreverent, but I was just utterly convinced. I was like, no problem. And that was the end of it. From that night onwards, I was waking up every single night. I couldn't make it through the night without going to the bathroom. And now, sometimes if I'm thirsty, I'll drink a lot of water before I go to bed, and I won't wake up. So all it took in that instance was one moment of faith. I didn't even hand it over to Bruno. I just had a moment of utter conviction that this was healable and that it would be taken care of. And it was that very day. I didn't think about it again. I just went to bed and woke up the next morning, and oh my gosh, didn't I didn't go I didn't wake up and have to go pee last night. That's amazing. And then I was still a little cautious about drinking water before I went to bed. And then at a certain point I just let that go, and I just sometimes right before I go to bed, I have a large glass of water and I don't wake up. So it can happen in an instant. So anything right now, anything that, um, any burden, life situation, what we call illness, and Bruno said it's just a form of evil. Let's hand it over now. Let's take a minute and just hand over to Bruno, to Christ, to God, to the energy, whichever feels right to you. Here's another quote of Bruno's. The sick person is under my protection. The sick person is under divine protection as long as he wants help and healing. So that's a very comforting thought that as long as we want the good, as long as we seek, as long as we seek what is good, then we're under divine protection and we're under Bruno's protection. Now that's a beautiful idea. And then what I've noticed is I really need to take it to heart. It's one thing to just think, oh, I'm under Bruno's protection. But it's another thing to really take that to heart. A being such as Bruno Groening, who, when he was in his body, he could just look at a person and know their entire history. A being whom, in his presence, illnesses vanish and still do vanish, even though he's not physically present. And really take that to heart. Oh my God, I'm under divine protection. I'm under Bruno Groening's protection. So let's really take that to heart. So and in doing these meetings, I sometimes, uh, I sometimes hesitate a little. I know some people feel more of a connection to Christ than to Bruno, and some people just focus more on God. So, Bruno always advised people to follow, to listen to God. And so I go through different phases where I feel more of a connection to Bruno, I feel more of a connection to God. And so I just invite people to really listen deeply inside of themselves, which is actually how Bruno described doing Einstein. Listen deeply inside yourself and then be guided by that. So that's whether we're focused on Bruno or whether we're focused on God, according to Bruno Groening, we're under divine protection. We're under his protection if we want what's good, if we want help and healing. Now, again, it's what I'm starting to learn about this path is that this is an active, ongoing path. It's one thing for me to say, I want help and healing. It's another thing to actively seek it throughout my day, to be thinking about, to be focusing on, to be wanting help and healing. and be really taking it to heart. Oh my, I'm under Bruno's protection. Because, according to Bruno, we've been taught wrongly how to do religion or how to do spirituality. Most of us have been taught, well, you just say this prayer, you go to church, you have these certain beliefs, and that's enough. And while Bruno wasn't critical of any particular religion or denomination, he was critical of that approach to religion. And so this is an active process of deepening our faith, of taking, as Bruno said in the Christmas speech that we've been reading the last couple of weeks, of really taking these things to heart, of really praying from our heart. So here's another quote of Bruno's. It doesn't depend on my small person and also does not depend on God's omnipotence or almighty power. It depends on the person alone. So that's a little intriguing. Taken out of context, that could be very confusing. So I'll read it again. And it doesn't depend on my small person and also does not depend on God's omnipotence or almighty power. It depends on the person alone. So, again, I need to study my German a little bit. I'm a little skeptical on the person alone piece, or just the word alone. And it's not enough to just be like, oh, Bruno's got me covered, or oh, God's got me covered. We have an essential part in this. We have an absolute essential part in this that, if you think about it, many people met Bruno Groening in person and didn't experience healing. So we have an absolute part in this process. And if you think about it, so according to Bruno, God wants only the good and is sending only the good for us. And God is almighty and all powerful. And we have free will. So in the present moment, we can say no to God. And I would say most of us on the spiritual path are recovering from different ways in the past in which we've said no to God. Because most of us here in the present moment are like, yes, God, please, complete healing. And we're in this process of healing all the times where we said no, all the times where we stepped onto the wrong path, all the times when we did wrong. All those things are just another way of saying turning away from God, turning away from the good. So, what is exactly our part? Bruno says, there's a quote: I am only the mediator. Faith alone does everything. I am only the mediator. Faith alone does everything. So, grace happens. Some people showed up uh, when Bruno was in his body skeptical. In the Bruno Groening documentary, one woman was like, okay, Bruno Groening, if you're such a great healer, heal this. And the healing happened. So those kind of healings do happen. People show up skeptical. Someone who's new to all this, and healings happen. And in terms of the path itself, and um, while those initial healings of grace and mercy do happen, in terms of walking this path, it really does depend on our faith. I sometimes think, Bruno said only the person who had faith or who was willing to start walking the right path and take up the faith again had the right to be healed. So sometimes those miracles, those healings happen to people who don't really have faith, but who are willing. And I was one such person. I was a complete agnostic when I found Bruno Groening. I was utterly convinced that it wasn't possible to know if there was a God. I wasn't convinced there wasn't a God, just that us as human beings can never know. But I was open. I wasn't like, no, there is no God and I'll never believe. I was just, we can't know. So I was one such person. And um, in a very short time after the first healing happened, I I was utterly convinced. Not utterly. I'm still on I was convinced that there was a God. Actually, it took some time. I was convinced that this path was true. That became very apparent to me very soon. And in a very short time, I just couldn't, I just had the evidence in my own body that God is real. And not only is God real, very active in our lives. So let's really take that to heart. I am only the mediator. Faith alone does everything. That we have a very important part in this path, and that is nurturing our faith, deepening our faith. As Bruno said, you have a duty to convince yourself of the truth and convince yourself further. So let's spend a little time. Each of us has a certain amount of faith, or we wouldn't be here, or at least a certain amount of openness. So let's find that level of faith and then let's nurture it, let's nourish it. Bruno would say things like, only have faith, and things like, only trust. It will happen. So let's do that now. Let's really trust in God. And trust and faith doesn't mean that we're going to get what we want when we want it. I like the word entrusting ourselves to God. Here's a quote of Bruno's: have faith, everything will be all right. I'm starting to think that's, in a sense, the answer to all of our problems, to have faith. Because most of the times when we're upset, it's from a lack of faith. We think, oh, this is happening, so God isn't in control. Or like, oh, there isn't a God. Or life isn't fair. Or this shouldn't be happening. Again, have faith. Everything will be all right. I'll do for you what you no longer can. Bruno spoke of this idea of a mediator, of a helper. The need for that until we're able to stand on our own 2 feet, until we're able to really believe for ourselves and take in the good directly. We need a mediator. That's, it's interesting in, I think in many forms of modern spirituality, like that's not, it's almost like that's not spiritually correct. This idea of needing help or needing a mediator and of course, as with everything Bruno says, we need to find out for ourselves. So let's really take that to heart. It's kind of it's a very short quote, but it's very powerful. Have faith. Everything will be all right. Let's first really take that to heart. Or see if that feels true to you, that everything will be all right. I think that's maybe behind the root of all of our suffering is this fear that everything won't be all right. Isn't that sort of at the root when it's kind of unconscious, almost this denial of God? Like, oh, such and such happened. Life isn't okay. This shouldn't be happening. Everything's awful. Those might be the thoughts that we're conscious of when things don't go our way or when we're challenged by something. But kind of underneath that or hid inside of those thoughts is all these different ways of saying like God's not in control. Everything isn't going to be okay. In fact, when Bruno was describing, what to do when you're not well or when you're struggling, he said to call on a friend who you can trust, who you really believe in, who you know can help. And I'm having to paraphrase here. And he said that friend will tell you, like, oh, hey, I can see you're upset, and you don't need to talk about it. If you want to, we can talk tomorrow. And everything will be all right. Because when we're upset, it seems to me that that's kind of at the root of it. We're thinking or believing everything's not all right. Like, this is a catastrophe. There is no God. Life isn't right. Or there is a God, but somehow he, she, it isn't in control. Just some kind of denial of God. So let's check in with ourselves. Is Bruno Groening right? Is everything going to be all right? He also said the good will prevail. It's a very powerful bottom line to have. The good will prevail. Everything will be all right. Let's see if let's check in with ourselves. Does that feel true to us? What would it be like to walk through our days just utterly convinced everything will be all right? Utterly convinced the good will prevail. It'd be so much less stressful. Oh my. I've been looking at the idea of a New Year's resolution, and my New Year's resolution was just to commit myself fully to the idea that God is trustworthy and reliable, that there is this power that helps and heals that's utterly reliable. And I think this is even a simpler way to say it. Everything will be okay. The good will prevail. And then from that, then we can elaborate a little maybe and say, God is completely reliable. God is completely trustworthy. There's this energy that helps and heals, that can do anything, that can do that which we can't do. And for some people, it's hard to believe just directly in God. And and on this path, we don't have to, because here's what Bruno says: have faith. Everything will be all right. I'll do for you what you no longer can. I'll do for you what you no longer can. That's a very strong promise. It's a very strong promise and a um, very comforting promise if we really take it to heart. Because if we reflect on, you know, Bruno showed us a little bit of himself when he was in his body. Not only could he, completely know a person's history, completely read minds, not only did illnesses vanish in his presence, but he displayed many other powers as well. He was once talking to someone in a bar. I think maybe, Bruno seems like a very serious person, but he also had a bit of a sense of humor. He was in a bar and he just, with his mind, and there was a radio playing and he just changed the station of the radio. And he was spending time with people and he's like, "Oh, I'll change the station." And he did it with his mind. And the people were just amazed. And then he did it again. And they were even more amazed. And then he said, "Oh, the owner of the bar is becoming concerned. I'm going to I'm going to switch it back to the original station." So, Bruno would walk down the street and say, "Oh, there was a temple there 6,000 years ago." So, so a being like that, and now even more so that he's not limited by being in a physical body. A being like that is basically saying, it's going to be okay. He says, I'll just quote it directly. "I'll do for you what you no longer can." So let's take that in. Really trusting that we have, not only is there an omnipotent God, but we have a helper who's basically promising to walk with us on this path until we experience salvation, until everything's all right. He doesn't say he'll do it for us. There's other places where he speaks of, well, I will help you on this path. And in some of the quotes I read earlier today, it's very clear we have our part of believing, of opening, of applying these teachings. And we have his promise that he'll do for us what we no longer can. So let's really take that to heart. And let's watch for thoughts and beliefs, that say, oh, this particular burden or this particular life situation, oh, that's too much, or I'm too messed up, or So let's be mindful of those thoughts and give them away and not take them to heart. Hmm, that's a beautiful. I just read, oh my gosh, one of the participants just put up a quote. I know the thoughts that I have towards you, says the Lord. This is from Jeremiah 29:11 through 13. I know the thoughts that I have towards you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and go and pray to me, and I will listen to you. Looks like there's a little more coming. So it's not one of the fun facts of the Earth School, and evil, Satan, disorder. Um, Bruno called it Bosse, this German word Bosse, which one of the meanings is evil, but one of the meanings is nastiness, viciousness. There's this force out there that will send us thoughts, such as thoughts like, you're never going to be healed. God can't help. Bruno can't help. Things that will deny the truth and will lead us down the wrong path. It's not one of the fun parts of being here on earth in a body is contending with that force. And that's why Bruno Groening emphasized watching our thoughts, because that's how the evil creeps in. However, if we turn to the good and seek the good and ask for the good, then we can have good thoughts that lead us towards God and thoughts of peace, just like this verse says. It was very timely. Oh my gosh. Okay, now I'm going to read the full verse. Again, Jeremiah 29:11 through 13. I know the thoughts that I have towards you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and go and pray to me, and I will listen to you, and you will seek and find me when you search for me with all your heart. That's kind of where I'm at actually in this journey is, for the first, I'd say, year of this path, I was doing a lot of Einstellung, but I was doing a lot of tuning in, and just miracles were happening and grace was happening. It was amazing, but I didn't really, have my full heart in it. And then I slowly wandered off the path, and actually it was negative thoughts that took me off the path. And And in this last couple of years, I haven't been as strong and firm in this as I was in the beginning. And that's what I've come to realize is that what this verse just is saying right here, and what Bruno said in the Christmas speech we read over and over. Well, he says it multiple times in the speech. Is we really have to pray with all our heart. As this verse says, is you know, if we want God, we have to really seek. We have to really seek from the deepest part of our being, our heart, our soul. Thank you so much for that, Orike. Beautiful. So let's take all this in. This need to be vigilant. And Bruno said when we're full of the good energy, then it's easier to ward off these thoughts. I'm sorry, when we're full of good energy, then we can ward off the negative thoughts. Our batteries are charged. My understanding is Bruno advised people to tune in at least twice a day. I was just sitting here wishing that, um, is wishing that how I was taught about the teachings of Christ was that was true. The way I was taught is you just you just think you're a Christian, you have certain beliefs, basically certain thoughts in your head. You go to church and that's all you need to do. You'll die and you'll go to heaven. Basically, you don't really have to do anything for salvation. And I kind of wish that's how it was. I, I- and it according to Bruno and in my own readings of the Bible, that's actually not what Christ taught at all. But it's not. Um, but the good news is that it's like the one step that we take towards the divine, does the divine take 99 steps towards us? We have our absolute part, and then we have we have our helper Bruno Groening, and what Bruno calls our savior, Jesus Christ, and we have omnipotent God. And it's like we reach towards the divine, and the divine and God's helpers reach towards us. And so I wish I could just say, okay, from now on, everything is going to be perfect. Everyone's healed. Everything's going to, like, I wish that was the good news. But I have some news that's almost as good. Everything is going to be okay. Everything is going to be all right. The good will prevail. And it's going to take some striving, as Bruno said, some effort. And we've got Bruno and we've got Jesus on our team. And in fact, the game is already, in a sense, won. Like the outcome is good. And there's going to be some effort and challenge to get there. So if anyone has any specific prayer requests, feel free to type them in. And so just to go over a little bit, what we looked at is, first of all, is that this energy we're taking in, healing isn't all it does. Healing is more of the side effect. What it does is it liberates us. It liberates us from evil and connects us to God. And there's such grace available. And Bruno said, give me your illnesses. And some people did that, have done that, and continue to do it. And illnesses vanish. There is absolute grace available. And in terms of walking this path, we have an absolute essential part of seeking the good. And even more so than seeking it, of having faith, faith in God. And Bruno once said, you don't have to have faith in the little Groening, but you do have to trust in me. And I found that very significant. That Bruno doesn't ask for our faith, but he does ask for our trust. And he, as one of the quotes we read here today, we have to want help and healing, and we have to want the good. And Bruno spoke of when a healing doesn't occur, it's because something needs to change in the person. So we have to be willing to change and grow. Bruno points out that we have a key part. And after faith, maybe what's most important is to watch our minds for any thoughts that deny faith, for all the thoughts that terrorize us, literally terrorize us, thinking about the future, thinking that everything's awful, thinking that, you know, all the thoughts that we, all the thoughts that basically deny God and deny that God's in charge and deny that we can be helped and healed. To firmly reject those thoughts and that beautiful quote from the Bible to really seek God with all our hearts and then to receive the good thoughts. To really take to heart that we have a very, in the truest sense of the word, a very true friend in Bruno Groening, who has said that we'll remain under his protection as long as we want what's good, as long as we want help and healing, and who will do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. And this idea that whether you call it the spiritual path or the religious path, that it requires active engagement. It's one thing to say, nothing is impossible, nothing is incurable. It's another thing to go through our day actively believing that, deepening that. And then, you know, and then this is a path. There are going to be moments where we don't have faith. And to recognize those moments and turn to God or turn to Bruno or reach out to someone who does have faith. I have Einstein buddies, tuning in buddies, and it's very helpful. And now I'm starting to cultivate faith buddies, meaning people I can call on when I'm human. I'm no I'm not a I haven't mastered this path yet. I have lots of moments of and in those moments we can turn to someone else who when our faith is we have moments of weakness who can remind us of the truth that oh yeah, God is almighty. So we'll close with a prayer and if oh beloved maker, source, our parent, our father, please, please help us to take in your saving, divine, healing energy, stream, current, this beautiful river of life to clean away everything that keeps us disconnected from you. Please, for everyone who attended tonight and everyone who listens and watches this video, please, please release, release of evil, release of what's not good, and taking in what is. Please, deeper and deeper faith. Please help us to deepen that faith. Please help us to seek to seek what's good, to seek God, to seek health and life. Please, mindfulness. Mindfulness. Mindfulness of our thoughts and a mind full of what's true and what's good, and vigilance against thoughts. Vigilance against thoughts that want to lead us on the wrong path. I have a beautiful example of how evil operates. So this morning I watched a very inspiring YouTube video about spiritual healing, about the teachings of Christ. It was this Christian minister. It was so inspiring. I was just so filled with good feeling and my faith was deepened. And then I had the thought, oh, why don't I go read a little bit about this pastor, this minister? And then I went online and I started to read a little bit about him, read his theology. And then after I finished reading, I felt a little disconnected because he and I have some different theological beliefs. And I just felt a little, sometimes when we read things on the computer, afterwards, sometimes we just feel a little drained or a little yucky. And I realized, oh my God, that's how evil works. Like I was feeling all full of this faith and hope. And then this thought comes to me, oh, why don't I read up a little bit about him? I don't remember the exact thought. It was something like that. And then I took that thought in and acted on it. And so it's not like it destroyed my faith or destroyed my day, but it definitely sort of lowered my sense of connection to God and took me out of that faith and into sort of distraction and just thinking. And I just didn't feel good after I did it. That's the long and short of it. I didn't feel good. And that's how evil operates. It sends sometimes just little thoughts like that to lead us down the wrong path. So please, please, Bruno, please, divine energy, please, God, please help us to be mindful of these thoughts and to discern which thoughts to take in and act on. Thanks everyone for joining in. Tomorrow, I believe. Let me complete the video. Thanks everyone for joining in live and watching this video. I wish you much a deepening faith, a deep connection to the divine, and taking in of this limitless power that can do anything. Much love. Aloha.